Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video.
Today's tip and trick video is going to go over the green mixes that I like to use and just kind of some information about greens in particular. So I have a number of tubes on my layout here, and some of these I use quite a bit and some of them I've only used a little bit. There are a number of greens out in the world that are available, and in general I find that greens, certain greens straight out of the tube are can be a little too strong for some landscapes. It depends on what I'm painting. Other things that are green may not, I may want that brighter color, but in general for a landscape type of situation, the greens you need to be careful with if they're straight out of the tube. So there are options that you can purchase that are from the tube, and then there are ways to mix greens, and most of the time I will mix greens, or I will use greens on my palette and mix them with something else as well to change the look of the green. So I won't go through all of the greens that I have sitting here, but I will talk about the ones that are on my palette, and I will also make some mixes from the greens that I have, and I'll take just a second and clear these off and I'll be right back. Now that I have the tubes moved out of the way, I want to just talk briefly about the greens that are on my palette. So I have Sap Green, I have Green Appetite Genuine from Daniel Smith, I have Serpentine Genuine from Daniel Smith, and I have a Green Gold that is also from Daniel Smith. And then on this corner I have Ultramarine Turquoise, and it's kind of on the teal side of green, so it's really my only cool green that is on the palette. The reason that I now have mostly warm greens is that a lot of the cooler greens that I might want to mix, I will use some of my yellows and blues, and sometimes one of my warmer greens with a blue to mix those cooler greens. So I'll just lay these out right quick so that you can see them. This is the Ultramarine Turquoise, and it's a very pretty deep kind of teal color, and it may be a little hard to see until it dries because of the lighting making it shine. And then my Sap Green, maybe if I lay my board a little flatter, that might make a difference. I'll do that. I usually paint with my board on a carving that my dad made for me, and it's about 2 inches high. So I want that gravity to help me, but in this situation, because I'm just giving some color swatches here, I don't need to have it tipped. That is Sap Green. Green Appetite Genuine is a very granular color, very granulating, so it has lots of little pieces in the paint once it's dry, and it also will look, some of the granulation will look a little brown, which I really like that variation. I like granulating pigments. So if you don't like granulation, then you might not want to look at getting green appetite. I also like how deep that pigment is, so that it makes a nice deep green, especially if I mix it with something. And then here is Serpentine, not Sapatite, Serpentine Genuine. And you can see all of these are kind of on the olivey green side of green. Not all of these. The last three are. The first one is not. And that is Serpentine Genuine. I used to have olive green on my palette, and I took that off because the Green Apatite and the Serpentine Genuine replace that color for me. And then Green Gold is one that I very rarely use, but when I want a very vibrant yellowy green, this is the one I will reach for. Although you can mix something very similar with a lemon yellow and a phthalo blue, or a Hansa Light and a phthalo blue. So that is a color that is mixable, but it is nice to have it available straight out of the tube that way as well. If I want to make a green, I will use my yellows and blues generally. So I did mention that you can make a very similar green to that green gold by using phthalo and either lemon yellow or Hansa. And I have Hansa Light on my palette. I like the transparency of the Hansa Light over some lemon yellows that you can get. Also for green gold, that pigment, there are other brands that make it besides Daniel Smith, and you need to be careful, or not careful, but just aware that some brands, green gold will be a little different than the Daniel Smith. Now this has a little more phthalo in it right now, so that is going to be more on the lime side of that green gold. And I can add some more Hansa. It's probably not going to go quite as close as maybe Aureolin yellow or New Gamboge might. So this is with the Hansa, and that's just barely any of the phthalo in there, so it will look a little yellower. So now if I I will try my New Gamboge. And some of the mixes that I do, I am just getting colors, green colors that I like. It doesn't necessarily have to be an exact mix, but these are things that I like to use. All right, so this is probably a little closer to green gold, but it may not get there exactly because the yellow that I'm using. So it's a little closer maybe than these two. These two are very vibrant, but they're not quite that green gold color. All right, so I'm going to kind of skip around here, and I will go to my Cobalt, and I use Cobalt with Hansa or Aureolin or New Gamboge quite a bit. So I'll get some Cobalt out, and maybe I'll just go ahead and put a little swatch of Cobalt over here. And if you're doing a chart with colors and you're showing how the different things look, I actually should have moved that Cobalt over a little bit, but I'm going to just do a little swatch here. That's the Hansa. And then this is Aureolin Hue. It's a Holbein color, so that it is a blend of several pigments to create the Aureolin look. And I have New Gamboge. I do have Hansa Medium right here. I haven't used it a lot. It's something newer on my palette. I tend to reach for the New Gamboge more, and then I also have Quin Gold. So I'll just do those 4 yellows. And then I will put some other colors across the top for blue. And I'll start with the Hansa and the Cobalt just so that I can kind of get this started. And Hansa and Cobalt, depending on how much you use of each, will give you a kind of a cooler green. And then if you were actually making a swatch chart, you could vary it so that it's got more blue in it or it has more yellow in it. And yeah, the swatch charts can range in all kinds of layouts. And then this is Aureolin. And it's going to be slightly more neutral or slightly warmer than the mix above it. It's not quite as vibrant. This is the New Gamboge, and I will need some more cobalt out. Swatch charts can take quite a while depending on how many colors you're looking at, and so I would just kind of sit down with a nice cup of tea or coffee or your favorite book on tape and just sit there and examine your colors and your palette. And trying these different mixes is a really good way to get used to how your pigments mix together and what you can achieve from those mixes. And right now I am trying to go kind of middle of the road with my mixes. I'm not trying to make them too warm or too cool. And I could push, so like for instance on this mix, this is the New Gamboge and the Cobalt mix, I can push that mix a little cooler. So those two colors with more of the blue in it makes something that is a cooler green, and it is a more neutral cool green than this green up in the corner, the Ultramarine Turquoise. And I will show you kind of toward the end of this another way you can lay your color out to try. But that one generally need a little more room, and it can take a little longer, so that's why I'm not using it for all of these. Okay, and then need a little more cobalt out, and this is the Quin Gold and the Cobalt. And the other way you could do something like this is you could just push one side of it a little warmer. So I have it a little cooler here, I have it a little warmer here, and you can get an idea of what that variation could look like. So as I said, many ways to lay out a color chart that you are creating for yourself. Okay, so then that's Cobalt, and I use a lot of ultramarine blue for mixes and also for greens. And so if I mix those colors together, this is the ultramarine blue, and it is deeper in value compared to the Cobalt. I'll see if I can just get a little bit of the Hansa over here. I may end up using most of it because I had a lot of ultramarine blue on my brush. So this probably is a little bluer, but if I put more yellow into it, then that would adjust it, obviously. Okay. Part of the reason a color chart takes so long is that you have to keep cleaning your brush. So you could use more than one brush, but right now I'll just stick with this. All right, and then this is the Aureolin hue with the ultramarine blue. And I'm going to add just a little more. Okay. This is the New Gamboge and the ultramarine blue. And depending again how much of the blue you have in it or how much of the yellow, this is the warmer side, this is slightly cooler over here. And one of the things to note is that if your yellow leans toward orange, so these yellows are warmer, they will make a more neutral green with a blue. because these guys lean toward green, and this one more than this one, the Hansa yellow is leaning toward green. When you mix it with a blue, it's going to be a more vibrant mix, and that's why these look a little less vibrant and these guys are a little more vibrant. And the last one, and I use Quin Gold with ultramarine blue quite a bit. I like it's like a foresty green color. It makes a really nice variation of warm and cool, kind of olivey, foresty green. I think I need to just pause and get more of the ultramarine. I wanted to try to push it a little cooler. All right, so there's the cooler side right there. And as these dry, I think they're a little easier to see. I also will do phthalo blue, and when we get to the end, I had another color I forgot that I was going to mention. I used to have Viridian and Hooker's green on my palette, and both Viridian and Hooker's are cooler greens. Hooker's is a blend of, let me see, I think I have one over here in my tubes that I had out. And this is Holbein's Hooker's, and I don't know that they, yeah, this one does have the pigments. It has 2 pigments in the mix, and I can't remember if Viridian is more than 1 pigment. I will have to pull out a color chart and look that up. But I found that those 2 greens, even though a lot of instructors when I was first learning watercolor were recommending those, over time I decided I didn't care for them. They were just too strong for my liking, and I would rather mix greens from these blues and yellows and get something that felt more natural than using the Hooker's or Viridian. Viridian is also a staining color, and it can be a bully. When you use it in mixes, it can really push against other colors and take over the mix. So that was another reason that I took it off my palette. All right, so to show you the same mixes with phthalo blue, I have pulled out phthalo, and phthalo is a staining color. It is a very vibrant turquoisey blue, but it can take over mixes just like the Viridian could, but phthalo for me has a lot more purposes than the Viridian ever did. So I use it and I like it, but you just have to be aware that it's staining and you may not need much of it in a mix. All right, so I have the Hansa light out, and it actually got a little blue in it from when I pulled the phthalo out. And this is that lime green mix that you can make with Hansa and the phthalo that I did up here. And that mix is because this yellow is leaning toward green, and so is the phthalo blue. So both of those have that penchant for leaning toward green, so it's going to give you a very vibrant mix. And then I will use a little bit of the Hansa yellow, and I'll bring it over. This has got a little more blue in the mix, and then maybe I'll push it so that it's a little more, I may have too much phthalo on my brush, a little more yellow as it comes this way. Okay, and as you can see, this chart really, I'm not being careful with how I'm laying it out. I would maybe not mix all these different ways of doing things, but I wanted to show you a little variety in how you could play with the mixes. And then the New Gamboge, I'll just bring a little bit of the phthalo over. So this is phthalo and the New Gamboge, and this olivey green is also a little neutral, but it's not quite as neutral as these olivey greens. Okay, and then a little phthalo with the quinacridone gold. And then I have a variety of other blues on my palette. I have cerulean, I have manganese, I have peacock blue, I have ultramarine deep. So the ultramarine deep is basically going to be like the regular ultramarine, and it will give you some variety in your greens that way. One of the other mixes that you can make with phthalo is burnt sienna and phthalo will make a green, but it's going to be a more neutral green. So I brought out a little bit of ultramarine or burnt sienna, and I have the phthalo out, and I can just mix those together, and I will show that. So it already neutralizes the turquoise a little bit, but I'm going to bring out a touch more. And there is sort of a fine line between having too much brown in the mix and not enough. All right, and then as I use more of the burnt sienna in the mix, it's probably a little hard to see on the video until it dries, as I said, but it is a more neutral, kind of cool, sagey green. And I will put that burnt sienna down here. So I'm not going to mix burnt sienna with these two blues because I know that burnt sienna with those blues will be a little more on the, well, it will be gray or brown or a deep blue, but not, it won't go green. So because the phthalo has green in it, you can use the burnt sienna with it to get kind of a sage color. You can also use your lighter blues. So cerulean is one of them, and I won't do the others, but I'll do cerulean right quick to mix with these yellows. And it is very similar to phthalo. It is a little more neutral and it is lighter. It won't go as dark as phthalo, and it is not staining. And so when I mix, I got the cerulean out but didn't get any to mix. When I mix the cerulean with my hand, excuse me, my hand's a light, and I've got a little more blue in the mix right now, so it's looking cooler. That's one that you can get. And with the aureolin yellow, and this has got a little more of the aureolin in it right now, but that's a nice vibrant kind of lime green, and it's a little warmer I think than some of these others. That mix. And color warmth or coolness is all relative, so it really kind of depends on what it's next to, what you're comparing it to, and how much of each of the pigment you have in the mix. So you can say, well, this looks warmer than this one, but it really is relative. So this was a little warmer than some of these, but now that I've got this mix in there, it's warmer than that one. And so it all depends on what is around it. Cerulean and the Quin Gold. And I probably need a little more Quin Gold. So you can do those kinds of mixes where you mix your blues and your greens, or your blues and your yellows together to get greens. You can also mix, I use my greens that are on my palette, and I will mix them with other colors. So for instance, my Green Apatite Genuine, I will mix with my ultramarine blue. Oh, that might be my phthalo. I'm not sure. I will lay that here because I'm not sure what that mix just was. That might be the Ultramarine Turquoise with the Green Apatite Genuine, because it has a very similar feel. It's just deeper in color. And I will pull out some ultramarine blue because I may have used it all. I believe I did. That's what comes from having a messy palette and trying to keep using it without getting it cleaned off. Okay, so this is, I better pull out some fresh green apatite so I can make sure I've got it right. Okay, so this is the ultramarine blue and the green apatite genuine, and that's this is green apatite right here, and by adding the ultramarine blue to it, I can vary it and make it a cooler green that is still kind of a little neutral. It's not a real vibrant green, but it's a very nice deep green. You can also alter your greens with your reds. So if you have a green, say for instance Sap Green, and I will pull that out and show you a mix. I can take my, I think I'll use Quinn Rose. And Quinn Rose is a cooler red. So this will depend on what red you're using. Does your red lean toward purple, or does it lean toward orange? And this red leans toward purple, just a little. So I can use those two colors and I can change the look of that green. So right now Sap Green is pretty vibrant, but if I want it to not be as vibrant, if I want to neutralize it a little bit or gray it down, then I will use a little bit of Quinn Rose in it, and you don't necessarily need a lot depending on what you're trying to do. And here is the mix with a little of the Quinn Rose in it, and you can already see how that neutralizes the Sap Green. It's not as vibrant and it changes the color. And I'll see if I can pull a little more. Let me pull a little more Sap Green over here. I can try to get it a little darker, but neutralize it a little bit. Okay, so there's a little variation. This is a little darker. It still has the rose in it, and it's closer to the original in value. This was a little light, but it is a little more neutral than the first one. And then I can really take the Quinn Rose into it, and if I do that, now it's pushing it toward brown. And there's nothing wrong with this green. The only thing is that it is a more neutral green. It is almost toward brown because I have a lot more of the rose in it. And when I do that, I just have to know that this is going to be maybe some part of a landscape where the colors are a little more neutral. It may be because the light is not as vibrant, or it's just maybe a little more that tone depending on what it is you're trying to depict. I was trying to think if there was another. So basically, for any of the greens that I try to mix for my watercolors, I will use either the colors I have on my palette, or I will do a mix with blues and yellows and some variety within that, because I want to have a variety of greens, whether I'm painting a water lily or a garden scene or a landscape, and or a hummingbird. I have used many of these greens on hummingbird paintings where some of them I want to have that vibrant glow. I've used green gold a lot on a hummingbird. I've used the ultramarine turquoise on hummingbirds, and sometimes mixes where I use the phthalo and the hands of light to make a lime green depending on what that hummingbird is. One of the other dark greens that I like, and let's see if I can find it right quick. And you can really go kind of down a rabbit's hole looking at all the different pigments that are out there and available, and that you can try. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you might find a color that you like better than any of those that I have on my palette. But I would just say take your time and learn the colors that you have available to you at the moment. Learn some of the mixes, and then maybe if you decide you're looking for something specific, then try some other greens. So this is Perylene Green, and it is a Daniel Smith pigment, and I'll just get a little bit out. And it is a deep foresty green, and let's see, it is looks like it's Perylene Green. I can't tell, it might be 1 or 2 pigments, and it just has a real nice deep foresty green feel about it. Now it's very similar to my green apatite and ultramarine blue mix that I made up there. So depending on the painting I'm doing, if I'm using green apatite and ultramarine blue elsewhere in the painting, I could just keep using that mix and make the mix that way. Or if I want to add the Perylene Green to something, that would also be an option. So I did also say I would show you another way that you can try mixes, and so I'll just do one of those right quick, and then we'll finish up. So when you're playing with your mixes, seeing what colors you want to use, another way that you can do it is lay out. I have color on my brush, which may not be too bad because then you can see what I'm doing. But generally it would be clear water, and I would lay out the swatch of color, and I'll use New Gamboge on one end, and then I usually will pull it down at least about halfway. The yellow, generally I may pull it farther than the blue, because the blue usually will have a little more body and deeper value, and it can take over a little faster than the yellow. This is cobalt, and so I'm just going to kind of help it along a little ways down that stripe. And if I have enough water, which I'm not sure that I do today, it's a little dry here, and so I'm going to get a little more water in and just lay it in the center here. See if I can get those colors to move. But generally you want to have enough water in the mix that you can get those 2 pigments to move back and forth and create the blend down the middle. So I'm going to load this up again because I added more water and I need more pigment at the end. It really is easier than I'm making it look right now. All right. And get some cobalt. I want the pure color on the end because I want to see what my mix is when I'm all done with it. And now that I have a little more water in the middle, hopefully this will work. And then this kind of mix is more of an optical mix because it is blending on the paper, and I am not making it be too yellow or too blue. It's more about the pigments and what they are doing, and which one, because some pigments are a little heavier, some pigments will push against the other color more. I need a little more of the cobalt to go down into the yellow, speaking of. And then we'll see if I can get this to equalize. So what I'm trying to do is get the center to go green. And I may have more color overall from the yellow side. I think I had more moisture down on that end. And it will give me an idea of what those 2 colors mixed together will do for a green mix. And it does take longer. It's kind of fun to play with. And you can kind of see what will happen on your paper if you just let them mix and blend sort of on their own. So that is another way that you can do a mix and try your colors. And there are many other ways that you can play with your colors. So if you're just wanting time in the studio to test colors and see what they do together, you can try other options to do these charts. They don't have to be just little swatches like this. So I hope that was helpful to give you an idea of some greens and green mixes that I use and like. I will post some paintings at the end of this video where you can see some of the greens that I've used and give you an idea of how they might be used in about 3 paintings, I think is what I will post at the end of this. And I hope you'll give some green mixes a try, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.